Money never feels like enough, no matter how much you earn, how much you save, or how hard you try. And that gap between what you have and what feels sufficient doesn't arrive as panic or collapse. It arrives quietly, as restlessness, as the feeling that something still isn't settled. You tell yourself you should feel safer by now, more grounded, more ahead, but the relief never fully lands. Even progress feels thin, temporary, like it doesn't register long enough to matter. You move the number, but the feeling doesn't move with it. And over time, that disconnect becomes disorienting, because objectively things may be improving, but internally, nothing feels complete. So your attention stays active. You keep scanning, keep recalculating, keep adjusting. Not because you want more, but because your system no longer recognizes enough as a stopping signal. Money stops being a measure of sufficiency and becomes a constant input stream, something that must be monitored, anticipated, rechecked. And when sufficiency no longer signals safety, effort replaces satisfaction. You don't arrive anywhere, you hover. Progress doesn't calm you, it keeps you alert. And that's where the distortion begins. This distortion didn't start with your current income. It started when money first taught your system what enough was supposed to feel like. For many people, enough never meant calm or completion. It meant temporary relief, a bill paid, a crisis delayed, a short pause before the next concern arrived. As a child, you weren't tracking numbers, you were tracking outcomes. You watched what happened after money entered the picture. Did tension leave the room, or did it just change shape? Did relief last, or did it evaporate almost immediately? If money was always followed by another worry, another trade-off, another argument, your nervous system learns something quietly but deeply. Enough is not stable. Enough is conditional. Enough does not last. So later in life, when numbers increase, the system doesn't relax. It stays alert. It braces for the next drop. Even abundance gets filtered through early learning, because your brain isn't asking how much you have, it's asking whether this will finally hold. And if history taught it that stability was fragile, then no amount ever fully answers that question. Progress feels provisional, safety feels temporary, and the idea of enough never solidifies into something your system can trust. Once that early pattern is set, the nervous system quietly rewires how safety is measured. It stops using numbers as evidence and starts using sensation instead. Calm becomes the signal. Relief becomes the signal. And because money never produced lasting calm before, the system learns not to trust it now. Even when things improve, the body stays alert. It keeps scanning for what could undo it. That's why more money doesn't feel reassuring. It feels like more to lose, more to manage, more to protect. The nervous system experiences higher numbers not as security, but as increased exposure. Visibility goes up, stakes go up, attention has to stay on. So instead of settling, the system tightens. Instead of relaxing, it anticipates. And because survival logic always prioritizes preventing loss over recognizing sufficiency, perception shifts in one direction only, toward risk, toward instability, toward what could go wrong next. Safety stops being something you notice and starts being something you defend. And the longer this runs, the more distorted the measurement becomes. The brain isn't asking, do I have enough? It's asking, am I still vulnerable? And vulnerability has no finish line. So progress doesn't land. Stability doesn't register. Enough never arrives as a feeling, only as a moving target that keeps the system alert, even when nothing is actually wrong. This is where the distortion turns personal and starts shaping identity. Because on the surface, you know what should be true. You know the numbers are better. You know you're not where you used to be. You can see the evidence of progress, and yet none of it quiets the internal scanning. So a conflict forms between what you can verify and what you're allowed to feel. Part of you believes you should finally relax. Another part doesn't trust that feeling enough to let go. To resolve that tension, identity quietly adapts. You start seeing yourself as someone who is never quite there yet, someone who has to stay sharp, stay prepared, stay slightly ahead of whatever might come next. Vigilance becomes proof of responsibility. Rest starts to feel reckless. Letting yourself feel settled feels naive, like tempting something to go wrong. So even when things are objectively stable,
you don't experience them that way. You downplay progress, you move the goalpost, you treat sufficiency as something you're not allowed to name out loud, because naming it would require lowering guard in a place where you once learned guard was the only thing keeping things together. Over time, that loyalty hardens. You become loyal not to stability, but to alertness, not to having enough, but to staying ready. And without ever choosing it consciously, never enough stops being a feeling and starts being part of who you are. Once this identity is in place, specific psychological mechanisms lock the distortion in and make it feel permanent. Loss aversion dominates first. Not losing stability becomes more important than recognizing that you already have it. Any sense of enough feels fragile, easy to undo, so the system treats satisfaction itself as risky. Present bias reinforces the distortion. Immediate vigilance feels safer than future reassurance because reassurance never lasted before. The brain prioritizes staying alert now over believing in safety later. Guilt loops quietly fill the space between. You feel guilty for wanting more.
Guilty for not feeling grateful enough. Guilty for still feeling tense when things are objectively fine. But that guilt doesn't bring relief. It sharpens monitoring. It keeps attention fixed on what might still be missing or threatened. Repetition strengthens the neural pathways around the scanning behavior. The brain becomes highly efficient at detecting insufficiency and increasingly poor at registering sufficiency. Money dysmorphia develops as perception bends around this bias. Your internal sense of what counts as a lot keeps recalibrating upward. Milestones lose weight, progress compresses. Achievements that once felt significant now feel neutral or fleeting. From there, identity-based income ceilings form in a subtle but powerful way, not as a refusal to earn more, but as an inability to ever feel settled at any level. Expansion doesn't promise relief. It promises more responsibility, more exposure, more chances for loss. So the system stays trapped in a paradox, always moving, always chasing, never arriving. Here's how the distortion escalates without you noticing. Because enough never registers, the system never fully powers down. Even after progress, vigilance stays active in the background, quietly consuming attention. That constant monitoring makes money feel heavier to think about, which reinforces the sense that things still aren't stable. The harder you work to feel secure, the more evidence your brain collects that security requires effort. Each gain raises the baseline of concern instead of lowering it. More income means more responsibility. More savings means more to protect. More stability means more to lose. Relief never arrives, so the system assumes the answer must be more control, more planning, more awareness. That keeps perception locked on threat. Over time, satisfaction starts to feel suspicious. Calm feels premature. Letting yourself feel settled feels like tempting loss, like lowering guard right before something goes wrong. So you stay braced even when nothing is happening. The loop feeds itself quietly. Vigilance distorts perception. Distorted perception justifies vigilance. And because this cycle never produces a clear breaking point, it feels normal, rational, responsible. You don't notice that the finish line keeps moving because your system no longer believes there is one. And this is the part most people never question. If more never feels like enough, if progress never settles your system, if safety never registers no matter how high the number goes, then the problem isn't motivation or discipline or gratitude. It's perception itself. Somewhere along the way, your brain stopped using money as a measure of sufficiency and started using it as a signal of risk. And once that shift happens, no amount ever completes the loop. You can keep earning, keep saving, keep improving, but the feeling you're chasing isn't located in the numbers anymore. It's trapped inside a system that learned early that stability was fragile and relief never lasted. So the unsettling question isn't why you want more. It's whether your brain still remembers what enough was supposed to feel like, or whether that signal has been quietly overridden by a survival system that no longer knows how to stand down, even when nothing is actually wrong.